Welcome back to another episode of Into the Airbnb, where we talk with Airbnb hosts about their short-term rental experience. Today's guest is Amie Parcinski, an Airbnb host from St Petersburg, Florida. Originally, she started on Airbnb in 2014 in San Diego, California, and recently moved down to Florida and continues with her journey in the short-term rental world, doing better than ever. Reaching up to $8,900 in the high season as revenue and expecting to cover her investment completely in 2 to 3 years' time. Come and join us and listen to the full episode to hear more about Amie's journey. This episode is sponsored by Airbnb, short-term rental analytics for high-return investments, comprehensive data for insights, ideas, and inspiration. Go to app.airbnb.com to find precise Airbnb data such as occupancy rate, revenue, average daily rate, and so on. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, can you tell me how did you get started on Airbnb?
Yes. So I was on a girls' trip with one of my friends who lived in Portland, and I was living in San Diego at the time, house hacking with my husband, what they call a 2-on-1. It's essentially a duplex, but there's, house in front and house in back. And we were just getting ready to finish up our yearly lease with the tenants that we had in the back house. And I was talking to my girlfriend and she was saying, oh yeah, well, we do this Airbnb thing. And it was still fairly new, Our next door neighbor was a hoarder. So I was like, I don't know if this is even going to work. Like, who's going to want to stay next to a hoarder? And we were in the city of San Diego too. We weren't necessarily by the beach or anything like that. We were in a cool neighborhood, but it's like, I don't even know if people know where our neighborhood is, She's like, oh no, you should give it a shot. So I moved half of our furniture from my house with my husband over to that house after the tenants moved out. And we listed it on Airbnb and the rest is history. Basically learning on the job, but started booking really well. And everything went well from there and continued on. And we took a few years off over the years of hosting and whatnot. But yeah, that was the start, 2014.
2014. So what month was that?
Oh, I want to say it was March, I believe.
March 2014, okay. And how did you dealt with the hoarder neighborhood that you have?
We don't own that particular property anymore, but at the time there was a 6-foot high chain link fence between the properties. So I got one of those, faux ivy walls that you can put up, so I hung the faux ivy. So at least, as people pull up and they see his property, their experience once they're on ours is like, oh, this is all, because it was such a cute house. It was very remodeled. So I just tried to make our little piece as cute and as, appealing as possible for them. And I mean, for the most part, not a lot of people complained or had issues with it. But when they did, I explained, listen, it's not a flop house or a drug house. It's just an older man who's not managing his situation well. He's totally harmless. I live here too, that sort of thing, try to mitigate the damage. But it was definitely a unique situation to be hosting next to.
Yeah, I understand that some people might have a little bit of problem with that, but it's good that you were renting on Airbnb, both sides of that 2-1 that you told me about.
So we ended up moving out of the front house because we were living in the front house and renting out the back house. And then we bought a triplex and moved into it with the intentions of remodeling it and then Airbnb-ing it out, which we did. Yeah, we started Airbnb-ing the front out, and I learned my first lesson about what really books well in that market. So our 2-bedroom, 1-bath, I thought would just be an instant hit, and that it would be as well booked as the front house as the back 1-1. But what I found out is it's not really you don't take your income times two, essentially, right? You're not doubling your income, unfortunately. So it was good and it booked well, but it was like, man, that one in that particular market booked great. And then when we moved to the triplex, we lived in this back, there was two 2-1s and then a studio. And man, we lived in one of the 2-1s, but I'll tell you what, that studio booked like crazy. Because you could book it, I could keep it fairly affordable for renters, and it went absolutely nuts. So that was definitely my first foray into, I thought I would just like it, that the 2-1s would be just as popular as the 1-1s, but they weren't necessarily.
Oh, I see. And were they like near each other in the same city, in the same neighborhood, same area?
Probably they were only about 5 to 10 minutes apart, but in a similar vibe of a neighborhood. So technically a different neighborhood, but one was a little bit more established as a hipster neighborhood, and the other one was a little bit more up and coming, a little bit more, this is where a lot of the locals live, versus like this hipster vibe that our previous neighborhood was really known for. Still both very walkable, but both very city neighborhoods. So you have, quote unquote city issues, like, so every once in a while, people are going to see homeless people, or, there's going to be, some dude stumbling out of a bar drunk or something like that. So it's like, that was always the interesting moment, is trying to explain and set up the expectation that like, hey, you're in a city, you're not at a resort, you're not in an environment where I can control everything. You are literally in a city, and there's going to be like, city issues or city features, I guess, however you look at it.
I understand about that. But you're receiving many complaints about all of this. That's why you are...
Not many, I wouldn't say, but it was definitely something that I think I wanted to, I think I always set it up like I had to put it in the description, because I did have a few complaints before I explicitly, you would think that people look on a map when they book an Airbnb and it's like, oh, well, you're not by the beach. No kidding. Nowhere does it say that. And if you looked at the map, you would know that we're not like super close to the beach. So I would just make sure on there, it's like, hey, listen, we're in the middle of the city. It's, a mixed bag of everything, which is what cities are. So I just had to set the expectation up front, I think, was really the key there. I'm like, hey, if you like walkability and you want to go to all the cool restaurants and be around a ton of cool bars and go get coffee and see art, do the art walks and stuff like that, then this is the neighborhood for you. It was really just about explaining who the target audience was.
And can I ask, what was the target audience that you are getting in top one listing?
Yeah, so a lot of young couples, definitely not people necessarily with young kids who weren't used to that sort of environment. So like definitely young couples who wanted to do something off the beaten path, or like a little bit more hipster, like, oh, come see how most San Diegans actually live. Like you want to go to the cool bars and to the cool restaurants. We had a lot of people coming down from LA for the weekend as well, who would just book a weekend just to get out of LA and change it up or whatever. So they're super on board with what like California has to offer. So a lot of those sort of like young traveling professional, that was our thing. And all of our units had laundry in them. So we actually would get a lot more longer term stays as well.
Oh, and I guess that's the reason why you are getting more people booking the studio, right?
Yeah, that one was people, especially like when you're booking a weekend, you get a lot of that too. But yeah, a lot of people who it's like, okay, well, this is, or maybe they're coming to town because I've had a bunch of different stuff, or, oh, my daughter's giving birth and I want to be there for an extended stay for 3 weeks. And that's an affordable place for you to do it. Oh, she lives, 2 blocks down or something like that. Or, hey, I'm coming to town with my husband to check out places because we want to move there, but I don't want to commit to an apartment before we, actually stay in the city for a while. So a lot of that type of thing. So which actually, obviously worked in our favor, and all of our places are dog friendly. So that was the other thing. I think that was a good hook,
Oh, so all of your listings are pet friendly.
Yes. Always be like, hey, run it by me first, because I think that that's important, because you don't want someone showing up with like 20 very hairy dogs or like a husky or something where, like even if they did, we have a little bit of a limit, and it's usually like, okay, what kind of dog is it? How many dogs is it? And just make sure that they clean up after their pet. But I find it's good to warn your cleaners ahead of time if someone's going to be bringing a dog or something like that, just so they can make sure that they're on it and they're there as soon as checkout happens. And then I charge a pet fee and just give it to the cleaners.
And can you tell me a little bit about your experience as someone who accepts pets into their listings? Do you do that now as well with your current listings?
Absolutely. That was actually really important to me because we're dog people too. And it's so nice to have somewhere you can go with your animals. So mostly it's been amazing. Every once in a while, someone abuses it. You get just like a ton of hair, or like they don't actually watch their dog and the dog pees on the floor or something like that. But for the most part, it's been really good. I buy tough fabrics. All my rug, I don't buy a ton of rugs, but the rugs I do have are washable and or like outdoor rugs. So they're thin and they're easy to vacuum. I live in Florida now, and a lot of the floor is either, the vinyl that is waterproof and or it's tile. So it's really, you don't want someone's dog peeing on your floor, but even if there is an accident or they didn't clean up or whatever, it's very easy to clean once they leave.
Okay, so you didn't have any really bad experiences with that so far?
No, it's been with people mostly, like people, we've definitely had like our messier guests, and it's like, okay, well, if they're messy, then their pets they're going to be messy with their pet is kind of the thing. It's like, if you're the type of people who, leave, even if with people with kids, sometimes they leave crumbs or cookies like smashed into the carpet or like things shoved into the couch, and you're like, how did this even happen? It's like, so if you're like that type of person who doesn't clean up after yourself that much, then that's how they're going to be with their pets too. You know what I mean? So it's a mixed bag, like everything.
And how did you manage to keep your guests who bring their pets in to be like, so I won't say so clean, but clean and respectful with your listing? So you said you didn't have many bad experience with that, and mostly when you heard about Airbnb hosts complaining about it is because, I don't know, maybe the dog tore up the sofa, the dog peed everywhere, the owner didn't take care of the pool, whatever. How did you manage it, and how did you get for the owners to be so careful with their pets inside your listing?
For sure. So when in the listing, I say, contact me for approval. Like, I'm not just going to, check mark your dog allowed to come. So I just make sure, I'm like, hey, we don't have a ton of rules with the dogs, but make sure that you clean up after your pet, or otherwise I'm charging you a fee. B, keep the animals off the sofa. Like, they never do, but it's like something to be like, okay, if I find excessive hair, that's going to be an extra cleaning fee. Hey, we're happy to have your pet. I usually paint it in a nice light. When people are on vacation, I feel like they don't want to be just excessively micromanaged. But mostly I paint it in the light like, hey, we're happy to have your pet, but please do us the favor of, picking up their poop in the yard and, making sure that there's not a ton of hair laying around for the cleaners. And we want to keep having pets. We don't want our cleaners to quit. I frame it like that. And they're usually like, oh, okay, yeah, no worries, and it's usually fine.
All right. So now that you mentioned that, do you charge a pet fee?
Yes, I charge a small pet fee and I give it to the cleaners just to keep incentivizing them to not be mad at me that I let pets go. It's come to the house. Mostly because it's a little bit extra vacuuming with the hair, and they really go nuts on the couch. They have to like really clean the couch and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a pet friendly listing, so I feel like the next guest should it's never going to be like no pet ever stayed there, basically.
Right.
But yeah, it's about treating my people right. And like, if I take care of my cleaners and say, hey, not only are they already paid well, but if you have have this extra $100 for the inconvenience of having to like do some more vacuuming, so that has worked out.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. And what about the longer stay? You told me that you accept some longer stays. When it comes to that, do you also accept guests who bring their dogs in those longer stays, or it's just for short-term guests?
Oh yeah, for both actually. So the first Airbnb that we opened in Florida from this iteration, like now that we moved back about 2 years ago, and we just recently opened last year Airbnb here. And, we have these guests that people call snowbirds. They come down from the north to get out of the winter in the winter. So this lady brought her dog and she stayed for 3 months. He's awesome. She took great care of the place, treated it like what it was her own. And now she's coming back again. She already booked for the next year. So she's coming back again. So we absolutely take guests with long term. And honestly, that's really, I think, where you get a lot of guests from. At least it's been my experience. There's probably just as many allergic people out there that don't want to have a pet friendly house or whatever. But we do have a lot of people who travel with their pet. And we've actually gotten a fair few guests from Georgia, sort of like regional to Florida guests who drive down and they bring their pets with them. But yeah, it's been great. She's just it was like a little terrier type of dog, not a lot of hair, super sweet, very well mannered, that sort of thing. So
I understand. So that's very nice. And can you tell me, how do you screen your guests so you get like the best quality possible out there?
Absolutely. So I lay out all of our rules just immediately in the description of the listing. So part of it is just how I think describe my listing. I describe my neighborhood as a family friendly residential neighborhood that, no parties are allowed. I do a minimum of 4 days for the bookings. I think that cuts down on a lot of it as well. And my house rules are absolutely no parties. Quiet time after. I have them agree to the rules too. I only do instant booking for people who have good reviews and who are recommended by other hosts. For people who are new, and then I also ask them to tell me why they're coming down. If it's just something simple like boys trip, I usually ask them to elaborate on that. Like, hey, yeah, that's great. Like, can you tell me a bit more? Usually I feel good about people who are like, oh, I'm traveling with my adult children, or, oh, it's just me, my husband and our kids, or something like that. Like those, I just feel like you can almost rubber stamp those guests. They're just coming for, like a normal trip, right? And they're not going to make the neighbors crazy. But if it's like, oh, girls trip, oh, boys trip, or something to that effect, coming for a wedding, I definitely dig in for more information. And even though I do have, I have the cameras and I have the outside only, of course, but I have the auto lock, the electronic deadbolt, so they can basically self-service. However, sometimes you just get a gut feel, and I let them know, like, hey, I'll be happy to meet you, to show you through the place. I'm just around the corner. I'll help. I'll walk you through the first time. Even if I don't, I feel like just the suggestion that I will be there, I will be monitoring the house, really cuts down on a lot of that nonsense.
Oh, I see. So that's a pretty good strategy, actually. So you just do this thing where you tell them that you're going to show them their house when you get this gut feeling that they're not going to be up to no good there?
Yes. And that usually, you'd be surprised how many people are like, if they're just immediately like, oh yeah, that'd be great, no problem. You kind of know that it's not going to be an issue. But if someone's like, kind of like, well, I don't know what time we're getting in, you just kind of get this sort of, I don't know. It's like after doing it for a few years, you kind of just get that vibe. It definitely helps. Like I said, when I was house hacking, just me, I'm like, I live here. So guess what? You're not going to be getting away with anything. But when you have these properties where I don't necessarily live next door anymore, I definitely trust my gut a little bit, especially when it's, boys trip, girls trip stuff.
Yeah, that's right. You have to be real careful with those type of things. And now that you mentioned the distance, do you live like near your listings, like the current listings you have right now?
No, about 15 to 20 minutes though. So it's not terrible, but I'm not like right around the corner. So it's not as easy as it once was for me to get to my listings.
But you still handle everything that when it comes to your listing, right? Less like not cleaning, but all the other things, like if they need something.
Yeah, I definitely manage myself. If there was someone I felt good about handing that over to, then I might consider it. But I just feel like things get missed when you're not doing it yourself, and no one cares about, it's like, the old adage, no one cares about your business as much as you care about your business. No one's going to work harder for you than you are. So just especially with only two, it's like, I want to really have that personal touch. And I think that's what sets you apart too. A lot of times it's great to systematize things, but there's something to be said for self-managing, you know?
Yeah, I completely understand. Yes, sometimes self-manage is the best you can do. You're not that far to your places, so it's all right, it's reasonable. And thank you for talking us about like your guest experience and everything. Now, I would like to know about the current listings that you own. You told me you're located currently in Florida, right?
Hmm.
How many listings do
Correct.
you own down there?
So we have two currently, both brought online. Well, no, the one was technically brought online at the end of 2021. The other one we just got it live early May of 2022. We're in unincorporated Pinellas County in Largo, Florida, so it's like right outside of Tampa. I'm sure you've heard of Clearwater Beach. We're like in that Gulf Coast region, in that sort of general like Tampa Bay area.
Mm-hmm. And when did you acquire this listing? So before this, you were doing Airbnb in San Diego, am I right?
Correct. Yes.
Uh-huh. And how did you end up there?
Yeah, so we ended up moving. I think right before the pandemic. I think I was getting to the point with San Diego where it's so expensive, it's crowded, and I felt like just like doing anything, like even the simple things like going to the beach or whatever, it was getting to be difficult. It wasn't as fun as it had been. So it's like, man, we could have the same thing lifestyle that we have here, but we could move back to Florida for half, and pay half essentially. Maybe we should think about doing that. And, we chose St. Petersburg, Florida, and we love it here. So we moved back right before the pandemic. And so we had nothing, we had sold everything and then moved back to St. Pete, Florida. And then we're like sitting out. I sat out the most of the pandemic, So I was like, we'll see how things go. It'd be kind of cool to just wait, which, of course is always a terrible, not looking back, it was a terrible idea because prices like went crazy. We started the first one in, like I said, November, December 2021. And it's been going really well. Really like the locations. They're at most 5 miles to the beach. The other one's like literally 5 minutes to the beach, but they're both in like nice residential neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me like a comparison about the experience of getting a property for short-term rental there? Is it easier to do it in San Diego or is it easier to do it in St. Petersburg, Florida?
So as of the time that we did it in San Diego, I felt like, because there was no regulations in San Diego, they hadn't really established any sort of rules other than, hey, just register with like so you can pay your taxes. It was like an online form and it took 2 seconds. So that was super easy. You could do it anywhere, right? And where we're at, in my personal neighborhood, in like most of the city of St. Petersburg, they actually have restrictions on short-term rentals that you can't do anything under 30 days. So there's these little pockets where you can do short-term rental. So navigating that, I felt like was a little bit more difficult, like knowing where you can rent. And that was the other thing that kept me out of the game for a while. So like, I don't want to do anything and they're sure you can look on Airbnb and find rentals in St. Petersburg, but I never wanted to get in a position where my numbers depended upon them not catching me. It's interesting because even in some of the really hot vacation markets like Clearwater Beach, there's only a small pocket where you can short-term rental, or I think that there's a few like condo buildings where you can short-term rental. But even in a lot of our beach areas, it's not legal under a certain amount of days. So it was interesting to navigate that process. Although conversely, what that makes me feel good about is now I feel bad for San Diego hosts, but they're severely limiting the short-term rental stock in San Diego. They've finally passed legislation and that's all going away. So I feel like at least with the regulations that are in place now in where I live, it's like, okay, well, they have rules. And as long as I play within those rules, it's established and it's not going away. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely understand now. So for now, it's a little bit easier to do it in Florida because in San Diego, they have applied the heavier rules, right?
Yeah. So probably a lot of units coming on the market here shortly, or probably just people going back to long-term renting or something,
And in these little areas that you told me about Florida where you can do short-term rental, are they getting saturated or are them like markets with maybe 100, 200, 300 listings?
they're getting pretty saturated because I think a lot of people found out about those markets that were allowed to do it. So you definitely see a lot more listings popping up, a lot of more people looking to invest their money. And, short-term rentals became pretty popular. I feel like, I've been doing it since 2014, but I feel like just in the past couple of years, more and more people are talking about Airbnb and short-term renting like it's something like it's brand new. But yeah, so I think a lot more people are jumping into the game. I mean, a theory that they won't be in the game that long. 'Cause, I mean, as much as we can systematize things, I do think it's still a lot of work, and it's you're running a hospitality business. So maybe not everybody's cut out for that type of thing.
I understand completely. Now, I'd like you to talk me about the difference when it comes to the house pricing in both markets, now that
Sure.
you've been there, right? So I'd like to know that, please.
For sure. So San Diego's super expensive. And that's not to say that St. Pete is cheap. I think prices have gone up just astronomically in both places, really, since the pandemic, like right around that time boom, prices have gone up. The difference, though, is that for most people, St. Petersburg would be, or my areas would be definitely still considered affordable. Maybe not to the locals, but probably to a lot of like investor type of money people. For example, the triplex that I sold, and we sold it, I want to say 2018. We fixed it up and sold it for 1.15. And it's now probably, the lady who brought it from us could probably sell it for 1.5, probably to 1.7. So literally the only way you can cash flow in a market like that is a short-term rental. People talk about those places not being great for long-term rentals, other than appreciation is amazing. So San Diego really works for house hacking, in my opinion. My places here, we bought in the fours, like the low fours, and they needed some work. Literally, some of them were, they were stinky. So we definitely got some stinkers, but they were like in the low fours. I've seen a lot, but there's a lot of property. We do pool houses here because I felt like people would want, coming to Florida, if you're not seeing it on the beach, you probably at least want a private pool, was my thinking anyway.
Yeah.
And then you're close to the beach. So probably like low fours is a good pocket for you there. I'm sure you could get way cheaper if you want to do a condo, and or like if you want to do a house without a pool, you can go less expensive. But I mean, while not everyone can afford both price points, I feel like fours is obviously way lower than and being in the ones. I think the San Diego median house price right now is like in the 800s, which is crazy.
So it went a little bit up from when you actually bought your things there in Petersburg?
Yeah, the prices went up, although I did buy during the boom too. So we definitely have appreciated. I do believe that we could probably get closer to 5 for our properties now. Some of that's forced appreciation as well, but yeah, the Tampa Bay area exploded through the pandemic, and out of 2020 up. My personal house has appreciated quite a bit as well. They're definitely up. I mean, nationwide housing seems like it's gone up considerably, but it's still, I think, a little bit more reachable for the average person. I mean, I don't know too many people who could afford $900,000 for a house, Yeah,
I understand completely about that. And when did you buy these listings in Florida? I think you told me before, but I cannot remember.
Yeah, so the first one I bought in late 2021, and the second one we bought in March of 2022.
2022. And when did you started making Airbnb with those two?
So we started late 2021 with the other one. I got just right before the new year, we welcomed our first guest for the one we bought in 2021, and then we started welcoming guests. So actually, what I did was I listed the one we bought in March of 2022. We had to do some fixing up to it, and then we put it on the market in May of 2022. And May's kind of dead, I feel like, in most markets, because people have done their spring break travel or done their spring travel. But, and now in May, they're, especially people with kids, and that's usually our market, right? Or they're finishing up school and kind of tying the bow on the end of the year, and they're getting ready for their summer vacations, or, they're planning on doing a summer vacation. So for us, it was dead. And what I did was I put it out on Zillow to see if anyone wanted to do a furnished rental for a month. And sure enough, I got a lovely couple who's local who was just remodeling their house. So they stayed for 6 weeks. And after they left, we welcomed our I was able to fill up our calendar while we were going through this like dead zone. And I
Mhm.
filled up our calendar for the summer and it worked out very nicely.
Oh, so that's really nice. It's all about like searching for strategies where you can keep the pockets occupied. Meanwhile, the market is real low, right?
Yeah, I love that segment of the market. I've also done a lot of travel nurse, like that
Mm-hmm.
midterm rental, the 1 to 3 months. Awesome. They're awesome. So yeah, it's a really nice supplement your low seasons.
Mm-hmm. I understand about that. And so far, so you told me you launched these around 2021 and May 2022, right? Did I understand
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
Okay. So how have they been performing on Airbnb? Like what would be the monthly revenue they make? Do they make a good rate when it comes to occupancy? Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, we've been doing very well. Probably so I'm thinking like in the lower month, in the winter months and then in the spring, if you averaged it all out, probably around like 6K a month. And then in the summer, it's been busier than I expected it to be. So like I think this month in both houses will make 8 to 9 to 8 to 9. It's been very busy this summer, which everyone kept saying like how dead it was, how dead it was. Maybe I'm just on the tail end of that because we've been fairly booked. We're looking at I underwrite everything to 70% occupancy for myself when I'm looking at it. Does this deal make sense? But we've been looking at closer to like 85 to 90. And honestly, like these past 2 months, I think I've only had 2 days vacant both months. So it's been very busy this summer, which is weird because I think that traditionally the summer is Florida's dead season, or
Yeah,
lighter season.
yeah. So if you are already seeing some ROI in your current listings down there in Florida, can you tell
Mhm.
me how much would be the current rate for that?
Yeah, so I inflate again when I like estimate everything. So I don't like know exactly off the top of my head, but I usually think that our carrying costs are around $3,000 a month per property. That includes the mortgage and all, everything, right? So that's about like 3K a month for the higher seasons. We've definitely have some capital expenditures. One of our
Mhm.
ACs just went out, so that was not super fun to get to replace in the middle of the summer. But yeah,
Mhm.
they've been pretty solid little businesses. For me, it's one of those things that if I can get, if we can clear $1,000 a month, I'd be totally happy. Compared, and then coupled with the appreciation, to me, that's a home run.
Yeah, that's all right. And how much time do you plan to get back all the investment that you've been making in these properties?
Yeah, I don't really think of it as I mean, I guess I don't really think about getting the money back because I feel like it's still in the investment, if that makes
Mm.
sense. At that rate, I guess it would be probably 4 years if I'm making $1,000 a month. Obviously, that's probably on the super, super low end. I would think 2 years to get
Yeah.
to get back the money, but I anticipate that we will. I don't think that there's going to be a dip in prices per se, but maybe a flattening. And I see that, we'll probably hit a recession here soon if we're not in a recession right now, but probably ride out this cycle and hit the next bump up and then maybe sell in 1031 into something else.
I understand. So that would be your future plan for now.
Yeah, that's what I always keep an eye on the market. I'm getting my real estate license here shortly too, so I'll be able to at least do my own deal. I don't think this is a forever hold situation. I'd love to get some properties on the beach. That would be
Mhm.
like the dream scenario, but we'll see how they do. And you never know. Sometimes I zig and zag, honestly. I love short-term rentals, but then there's that moment where you're like, it's nice just having steady income. And then long-term rentals seem very sexy. And so I have a mixed portfolio. So who knows what the next investment will be, but they're such a good cash flow
Yeah.
vehicle. Love it.
Yeah, I understand. And do you feel, now that you talk about long-term rentals again, do you feel more comfortable like doing short-term rentals or long-term rentals?
Honestly, long-term rentals is so nice because I mean, there's a lot less pressure for you to fix something the second a guest reports it, like meeting expectations. Because, conversely, the long-term rental, the person has come and toured the apartment. They know exactly what they're getting. They know what to expect. There's not a lot of expectations there. If something needs to be fixed, I will call a handyman and get someone out as soon as possible in both scenarios. But the expectation with the Airbnb guest is that it's fixed immediately. You know what I mean? Obviously, if it's, something that's dangerous, like if my AC's out in Florida in the summer, obviously that needs to be done immediately because that's a safety hazard. But, just like the little things, I feel like they need attention constantly. So if I can make good cash flow with long-term rentals, that for sure, I feel more steady with that. Even in a recession too, people do start traveling less. So I always keep an eye on.
Okay, so short-term rentals would be the most comfortable and alternate path to short-term rentals, right?
Long-term rentals are the most comfortable, but definitely don't have the crazy cash flow that the short-term rentals can.
Yes, that's all right. That's all right. Now, I'd like to talk about your market. So you told me you're in St. Petersburg, Florida. Both of the listings are located there, right?
Mm-hmm, correct.
So we talked before, low season would be summer and high season would be winter, spring.
Yes, winter, spring. But I think that the low season is definitely those shoulder seasons where you're getting out of the spring and then where you're getting out of the summer, really. So I think that when people are going back to school, when they have their kids going back to school, that September, October is usually pretty dead. And I honestly saw that in San Diego too. It's just like people are traveling, like families and whatever are traveling just a little bit less because they're like, and I think even adults who have, kids who are maybe like even when you're traveling for work, people don't want to they want to say, hey, I want to go to my kids' first practice and I want to drop them off for their first day of school. I think that you see a lot of that. And then at the end of the school year too, like that May, the end of April to May, there's just not a ton of people traveling then. You get your random bookings here or there, but it's definitely a little bit lighter. But I think that we pick back up in that summer where it's not super booked, but it's fairly booked because families are traveling, kids are off school, even though it's hotter than Hades down here in the summer. But I think that you see a lot of people still traveling because it's their time,
Yeah, I understand. And during those lower seasons, what would be like the average, how do you say this, average occupancy rate that you get in your listings?
Yeah. I think like 70% those months. Like you'll probably get like 18 days booked, which is great because it still pays the bills and you still walk away with a little bit of money. And then but you also have those time to do those like little, your little paint touch-ups and your little fixes that need to be done. And it's like seize that moment, right? Do inventory.
Yes, that's a great tip actually. So low season isn't necessarily bad. It also gives you like the time to keep up with the maintenance of the listing. That's right. That's right.
Yes, before you're just turning people over back to back to back to back. It's like, okay, now's the moment to take a breath and get it ready for the next crazy burst,
Yeah, that's right. That's the good part about the low season, right? Okay, so now I'd like you to tell me lastly about how do you deal with pricing?
Oh, pricing's difficult for sure. So I do have price labs on both. I have it set up for both. But as far as like, you still have to set a minimum and a maximum, or I don't set a maximum, but a minimum and a base. And I definitely look at a lot. I do a lot of research on my own. Let them set a price and I look at their reports as well. And because Priceline has some nice reports, but I do some actually like I get into the system myself. I say, okay, I'm going to go look at people who I know, are in my actual geographic area. Because once you're local or once you know your area, you can dig in a little bit and you know which areas people are in, so you can compare apples to apples. And I say, okay, well, what is this? What is this person's calendar? I have a lot of favorited listings too. I say, what does this person's calendar look like? What's their base price? What is their price in high season? Like, and how many you can tell by how many years someone's been a host and then how many like reviews they have on a particular property, like how booked they are, I think in general, and just the vibe. You say, oh yeah, they have cool design too. I think that this is like something I would want to target. That's how I compare, like usually generate a price, but I'm constantly tweaking it, constantly looking at people who I think have similar styles and similar layouts and amenities to me. And I say, what are they at right now? Did they bump theirs down? Maybe I should bump mine down a little bit too. And just keep an eye on the market, because, pricing software is amazing. It definitely catches those demand days that you didn't really realize were demand days. Most people know about the holidays, or sometimes you forget to bump your price up for a holiday if you're doing manual pricing, but it has been really cool to play around with that pricing software. But you still have to be on top of it and manage ahead of the curve, because they're pulling past data and they're pulling live data. But if you're starting to see a dip, or people are complaining that they're not getting booked, it is your responsibility to be in there and knowing where your market's at, and knowing what your customer really is looking for. So a little bit of both of automatic pricing and just like obsessing over everyone else's listings.
Yeah, that sounds good though. Like a good strategy. Sometimes people can rely too much on like any of those, and it not be a good balancing. Maybe they're pricing the wrong way. That's what bringing their listing down. So what you're doing is actually really great. Both of them are great resources you have to use, and you're really seizing them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh.
It's been good so far. Well, I'm curious to see how the next year goes, but so far so good in Florida, I should say.
Oh, okay. That's all right. That's great to hear. And two last things that I would like you to tell me is, what challenges have you had so far as an Airbnb host, and what tips would you leave for other Airbnb hosts?
Oh, for sure. The one that pops into my mind, and this is such a rookie mistake that I made, I'm still kicking myself, is not putting in the darn Nest thermostat or the programmable thermostat. I totally underestimated guests visiting Florida. You would think that they would know how hot it is. I didn't realize what they were up to, but we've gone into a couple times to people have set the thermostat to like 58 degrees or 62 degrees, and it's 100 degrees outside, which, causes issues with the actual unit itself and can cause damage because it just never stops running. Like, it doesn't blow colder air because you set it to super low. Like, that's not how air conditionings work. But your AC bills get just crazy. Just your energy bills get crazy. So that was my mistake. Should have done it from the get-go. But yeah, that would be my number one tip, is put all of the devices in your Airbnb. People will get crazy with your thermostat. They will leave the windows open and try to crank the AC up. Probably converse same thing for people in winter, in winter locations. They'll set the heat super high and then leave the window open to go out to your hot tub or something. People are on vacation, they turn their brains off and they want to enjoy themselves, and that's just kind of how it goes. So get all the monitoring devices and just cover your butt a little bit. That'd be my number one tip. And then I guess lastly, though, keeping in that theme, people are on vacation at your home. We as hosts need to remember that we are in hospitality business. We do need to remember that these people paid a really decent price to come and visit and stay at your place. So try to come from a place of empathy when you're frustrated with someone, expecting every amenity on the planet, and maybe something goes wrong. These people waited all year to come visit you, and they spent their hard-earned money and brought their kids, and they wanted something perfect. So try to deliver them as much as you can the experience they hoped for.
Yeah, those are really great tips, and really up to like what every Airbnb host needs to know. So
yeah,
that will do it for today. Thank you a lot for your time. It has been really, really fun to talk to you and get to hear about your experiences.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. Have a great time.
Thanks for listening to Into the Airbnb. We're looking for hosts and other people in the short-term rental industry to interview. If you had what we need and would like to share your experience in this podcast, please send us an email. All the info is at the end of the description.